Hi, this is Timothy Vavra calling to you live from delphic.group. We're doing a live stream today on pharmaceuticals. We've done a variety of other live streams on topics today, but what we advocate for is delphic.group. We wanted to do one on pharmaceuticals because all these different things in this world happening. There are so many different groups, and they're all doing one thing or another. And sometimes there are things that you can feel like you can get involved with, and then you can feel like you can say, oh, I can make a meaningful, appreciable difference here. I can say something that's not being said. So I wanted to kind of add my voice to the chorus of people who are talking about these reforms that should be happening, because it seems a bit senseless the way that things are currently. So yeah, and we've seen a lot of struggling and a lot of difficulty from people that have been unfairly had their lives derailed by the current structure of things, and had their lives really made appreciably worse. Sometimes lives, are ruined by the way things are currently with the current structure for pharmaceuticals, and so from people who are dying because they're not getting their insulin, to people who are driven into unfair and unjust black markets by people being pulled on from the rug out from under them. I think a perfect example of this is patients who I know from histories of, who have had pain medication for years, right? And my own grandmother, whose spine had an injury and had troubles in her older years. Her spine was partially polarized. She was in a great deal of pain. She was as active as she could be. She lived to a ripe old age, but she had back pain and chronic back pain. And when her doctor, and my mother was a registered nurse, so she was prepared when her doctor came to her and said, "Oh, I think your mother is addicted to pain medicine." Well, my mother knew that my grandmother was not getting her jollies from her pain medicine. She knew that she was using her pain medicine to relieve the pain that she was suffering. And I've had many people in my life, this is an early example of this, of the pig-headedness of authorities and structures to rein in people and to control what they can consume, or what they can try, or the resources, how are they available, and to who, and who gets this version of this and who gets that version of this. And if you're in the in club, a man like, Mitch McConnell, all of his buddies get cocaine, but everybody else, good luck, Chuck. So what I'm saying to people is everyone should have access to really everything. And ultimately, it shouldn't be a free-for-all, but it should be regulated. And I'd say the way to do it is to have like a methadone clinic for most things, right? And the way that this dispensaries for cannabis distribution are set up are optimal right now, and I wouldn't change that. And it's ideal where you have states where it's medical and recreational. It's grand, it's ideal. I wouldn't touch it. It's the tax rate is great. It seems like a fair way of people getting their medicine, and it's not like people going in and getting their jollies most time. With a sativa, it gives you focus, it gives you mental clarity, it gives you enthusiasm, it uplifts you, it can give you catharsis. If you're going through suffering, and an indica too, whereas like with indica, it has more of a sedative effect, where you have, oh, you don't want to be sleepy, but somebody who's going through chemotherapy, somebody who's going through one thing or another, some real bad sicknesses, fibromyalgia is hard to touch. Something like that can give them the relief they need. Somebody who's dealing with insomnia or stress or anxiety or nausea, all these things are affected by things that grow out of the ground. And so why are they controlled? Is because they grow out of the ground. So it's like we're moving into a world where anyone could print anything at home, or just engineer a little piece of yeast, flick it into a bin full of sugar, and then if they want it to be one thing or another, they could engineer it to, instead of it being a champagne yeast, it becomes, a cannabinoid yeast. And this is already being done. It's great research. I'm advocating for it. It's a transitionary thing. I support like heritage growing from landrace strains and hybrids that are new, and to say, oh, this is worth distributing to the public. And oftentimes it's a labor of love for these companies that make this stuff. They grow it. They grow it using sometimes novel methods, sometimes non-traditional, sometimes traditional methods. And it's like sometimes these can be better medicines for people than some of these medicines that they invented to do one thing or another. So going back to that, It's like the long, hard fight we had to get CBD to where it is in this country, where many places you can order CBD on Groupon, on Amazon, you can order CBD. You can go to a place that's a specific place and get fancy CBD. But regardless of this, anyone who tries CBD, and I'll be an advocate for it here, can see the amazing anti-inflammatory effects, the amazing anti-nausea and anti-anxiety effects. And it's like, if you get a lab verified CBD that has nothing else in it, there's no jollies to be had. It's completely therapeutic. It's completely, if I messed up my shoulder, my wife has bursitis in her shoulder. She takes this, the bursitis just goes right away. If she takes like naproxen, she can't take NSAIDs because of her blood thinning condition. So I feel like this draws it into perspective with all the different people who have all these different conditions. And doctors like the power they have over their patients a lot of the time. And the power structure of doctors and the power structure of pharmaceutical companies, they like the power they have over their patients and the clients and what the trouble is when they manipulate those clients too much, they push them into markets where they don't have control over them anymore. So, it's like, I think a perfect time to bring up the FDA. And what I'd like to bring up about the FDA is, it's like sometimes it gets to be like a bit of a thing where it amuses Tim, because with the FDA, they issue a release about like bitter orange supplements. And they say, oh, well, this bitter orange supplement that traditionally people take bitter orange supplement to, increase weight loss and energy and reduce appetite. Well, we found when we analyze these pills that they contain an appetite suppressant, they contain a metabolism booster, and they contain all these synthetic things that are not bitter orange, okay? So we would just want you people to know that this is what you're consuming if you consume this specific bitter orange supplement. They don't take it off the market or anything. They just advertise it so that you can go and get your synthetic pharmaceuticals without having to talk to a doctor. And frankly, if we're being honest, it's a better system. Unrestricted access to everything is probably a better system. And it's like, it's better to have it like a methadone clinic where you have a structure where it's like, oh, you addicted to heroin, you're addicted to this or that, you go, and there's a harm reduction. And this many times is taking place in Scandinavia, it's taking place in Europe. There are countries who are doing harm reduction. But I'm advocating for full access. So, like an organization like the DEA, who is currently like, their job is policing these, making these black markets a little bit less accessible. So, where they can lay their labors down, and they can lay their weapons down. They can relax. They can put on a Hawaiian shirt, and they can use their interdisciplinary genius that they have. They have materials genius. They have knowledge. I have such respect for the DEA. They're incredible. They can use that. They don't have to worry anymore. They don't have to worry about this cat and mouse Cold War between providers like, that are in these countries that are outside of here or internally. They don't have to worry about any of these worries anymore, because it's a worry. You don't want to go into work and worry, right? So you'd rather, they can be like the FDA is, where they ensure that the markets are safe, regulated, well maintained, and providing to the public. And so if you have something like, you have somebody who's addicted to, let's say they're addicted to cocaine, right? Let's say they're addicted to methamphetamines. Let's say they're addicted to whatever. Let's say they're a married couple, and every 3 months they want to get a couple ecstasy pills for themselves. They don't want to go to a rave to get ecstasy pills. They want to make sure that what they're getting is pharmaceutically what it should be. They don't want to just be having like PCP in their pill or something that's been pressed, whatever shit does it press in the pill. They want the pure pharmaceutical grade. And so this is what the DEA is best at. Working with these groups to ensure. Look at Alexander Shulgin, and if you study Alexander Shulgin, you'll see that he worked with the DEA, and he had a very amicable relationship with them, and many great discoveries were made because he had the bravery to try these compounds that nobody else did. And certain things like ethnogens, like DMT, ayahuasca, magic mushrooms, acid, all these different controlled substances that are so spooky, and we're so worried about, like, somebody walking off a building. What they did, this is the education the elite got. And so it's like, you were talking about Dr. Henry Killinger in my favorite episode of the Venture Brothers, The Doctor is Sin, and he's leading Dr. Venture through this this ethnogen trip of standing inside of his magic murder bag, and the only thing that he'll be able to bring in there is something that he brought with him. And so he's standing there in the ethnogen bag, and he's like, he's got these mummies coming towards him. And one of these mummies is stinking thinking, and one of them is dilly-dallying, and all the different ones. And this is proper set and setting. This is you're going through a journey, and the journey is trying to be catharsis for you. It's trying to reveal your journey going forward. And a lot of these ethnogens, that are like mushrooms or acid or DMT, these make connections in your brain where they didn't exist. And sometimes this can heal. So, but it has to be done therapeutically. So that's why there has to be a center where it's like, oh, okay. It's like, so if somebody really was loving DMT and they wanted to do DMT all the time to have discoveries, they go, oh, well, you could just say, oh, just go to this clinic where you can get your DMT. You get a little jar of DMT. You go there every once in a while. It's regulated, it's taxed, it's made sure. And it's like, does that person need therapy that's going to want to do that magic mushrooms every once in a while? Does that person need therapy? This is the answer to therapy largely. This is the answer to why have these things been held back for so long? The reason why is because it largely it obliviates the need for therapy. It makes you more well adjusted. The traumas, they can go under. They have studies where they've taken people who have PTSD and they've been traumatized, and they've given them ecstasy, or they've given them mushrooms, or they've given them DMT or acid, and they make them sometimes relive these traumas, or sometimes it happens naturally when the person is ready to approach this type of stuff. And what happens afterwards is so many times they don't go back to that trauma. That trauma is the association that they had triggering them has been severed by these uses of these psychedelics. So why has this been held back for so long? Because people they don't want, this is where we're going to tie into our next video on medical research. So we're doing several of these videos. We're doing one on medical research. We want to talk about saying, well, okay, we have these discoveries. We want to see them spread to the world for as cheap as possible. And it's like, what happened with Jonas Salk and penicillin is tragic, where it's like, he gave that away for free to benefit the world. And then they made it to be like this thing where they nickel and dimed it, and people had to pay more for no good reason. So this is why we're doing what we're doing. We're trying to get out in front of it. We're trying to make things more accessible for people. We're trying to make things easier for people. One of the things we want to say before this video ends, because it's on pharmaceuticals, is that so many of these access to pharmaceuticals is through black markets, and so many people suffered. So many people suffered because these laws were unjust. And who suffered? The people who were selling things on the black market suffered. And the people who were enforcing these laws were put under threat of, you make the punishments bad enough. When people do something, the last thing police officers want to do is deal with somebody who's willing to fight to the death. They don't want to deal with that. They want to deal with amicable conversations. They want to deal with, somebody buying them a donut because they like them. And that's what they should like. And why do we want anything other than that in life? Why don't we want to enjoy ourselves and let others enjoy themselves freely? So that's what we're advocating for largely. You could call it delphic group libertarian. I would say it's less libertarian. It's kind of like libertarian socialism. It's kind of like, it's not just, it's the reconciliation of capitalism and socialism. It's finding the synergies. So I hope you'll enjoy joining us on this journey of finding the synergies and advocating for them and celebrating them and holding them up for the world to see. These are the solutions. These are the ideas that will succeed if only they're talked about. So I encourage you to share with your friends, and first and foremost, share the ideas with your friends. If you think that the channel is cool, if you want to check it out more, we're going to have interviews, we're going to have book reviews, we're going to have all sorts of cool shit. Ooh, excuse my French. I'll leave you to it. Thank goodness this stream is not for kids. I'll leave you to it. I hope you have a grand day, and tune in for more videos, whatever you like.